All right, your globalization exam is just around the corner, right? Well, you're in the right place. We're about to break down exactly what you need to know to absolutely ace it. Let's get right into it.
So, let's start with the big one. What is globalization really? And maybe more importantly for you right now, what are the absolute must-know concepts that are going to get you those top marks on your exam? That's exactly what we're going to unpack.
Okay, here's our game plan. We'll nail down the definition, run through the history, look at the 5 key parts of it, get a critical perspective, talk about how you govern this whole thing, and then wrap up with your exam takeaways. Simple as that.
All right, first things first, defining globalization. Now, for your exam, you're really going to want to lock in these 3 core ideas.
Okay, idea number 1 comes from Anthony Giddens, and it's this concept of intensified interconnection. Basically, it means our world is so tangled up now that what happens in your town can be shaped by an event on the other side of the planet, and the other way around too. A perfect example for an essay would be a financial crisis starting in one country and then, whoosh, it ripples out and affects economies everywhere. It's all about that deep two-way connection.
Next up, Roland Robertson talks about world compression, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's this idea that technology, the internet, cheap flights, has basically shrunk the globe. The distance just doesn't feel as vast anymore, and because of that, we're way more aware of what's happening everywhere, all at once. The world just feels smaller.
And the third key definition, this one's from David Held, is the reorganization of space and power. Now this one's a bit of a game changer. It's not just that the world is more connected, it's that the connections themselves are changing the rules of the game. All that stuff moving across borders, money, goods, information, it's actually shaking up who holds the power. It's not just about governments anymore. So it's a smaller world, yeah? But it's also a world where the power map is being completely redrawn.
Okay, so we've got the what. Now let's talk about the how. How did we even get to this point? We can break down the history into 5 big waves.
So the first wave, stretching way back to 1450, was all about European exploration and colonialism. Then comes the second wave, kicked off by the Industrial Revolution, really supercharging things until World War I. After World War II, we get the third wave. This is where institutions like the IMF pop up. And then it goes into overdrive in the 90s with the internet. And that brings us to today, the fourth wave, which is all about AI, online shopping, but also, and this is key, facing huge global problems like climate change. The big takeaway here, each wave doesn't replace the last one, it builds on top of it, making everything more and more connected and complex.
So that's the history. But what does globalization actually look like today? Well, to really get a handle on it for your exam, we can slice it up into 5 key areas or facets.
First up, you've got the economic side. Think of money flashing across the planet in an instant, markets that never sleep, and these giant companies, transnational corporations or TNCs that operate everywhere. The perfect example to drop in your exam? A smartphone designed in California, parts from South Korea, assembled in China, funded by investors from all over, and then sold right back to you. That's the global supply chain in a nutshell.
Then there's the political part. Now, countries are still super important, right? But here's the catch. Massive problems like climate change or pandemics don't care about borders. So countries have to work together. And this creates this constant tug of war between what's best for one country versus what's needed for the whole world. Think about it. A nation might have to accept some economic pain at home to pass green laws that help the entire planet. And of course, there's the cultural side. This is the one we see every day, right? Watching a Hollywood movie, listening to K-pop, eating sushi, it's all flowing around the world thanks to the internet and social media. And while that's amazing for sharing ideas, it brings up a really important critical point for your exam. The fear of cultural homogenization. That's a fancy way of saying we might all end up a bit the same, with dominant cultures kind of steamrolling local ones. The fact you can find a McDonald's almost anywhere is a classic example.
Okay, now for the ecological facet. And this one is huge. All this global trade and making and consuming stuff, it's putting a massive strain on the planet. We're talking about pushing past what scientists call planetary boundaries, which leads to climate change and species disappearing forever. And this is a perfect illustration of why we need global cooperation, like the Paris Agreement. No one country can fix the climate on its own. It's an all-or-nothing problem.
And finally, the technological piece. Honestly, you could say this is the engine driving the whole thing. The internet, AI, social media, it's what makes the world compression we talked about actually happen. It's incredibly powerful. It can bring people together for global movements like online climate strikes, but there's always a but. It also creates new problems, like the gap between people with and without internet access and major cybersecurity risks.
Okay, this next part is absolutely crucial if you want to get the top marks. You can't just describe globalization. You have to be critical. You have to weigh the good against the bad, the gains versus the costs.
On the one hand, the gains are pretty obvious. More money flowing around, more trade, more connections. But the flip side is huge. Those benefits, they don't land evenly. For some people, it means lost jobs. It can lead to a race to the bottom, where companies look for the cheapest labor and weakest safety rules. And we've already talked about the massive environmental bill. Now, the key point here is that most critics aren't saying, let's just stop globalization. They're saying, we need to change the rules of the game to make it fair and more sustainable.
And all of this leads to one massive final topic. How on earth do we manage this super-connected world? And for your exam, it's less about having all the answers, and more about understanding the really tough questions that leaders are grappling with right now.
First, how do we take care of the stuff we all share, our global commons, like the oceans, the atmosphere, or even global public health?
And that naturally leads to this. How do you get a country to balance its own needs with what the whole planet needs?
Let's make that really concrete. Should a global need, like slashing carbon emissions, be more important than a single country's desire to grow its economy?
And the ultimate challenge is this. How can we create global rules and institutions that actually work, and that everyone agrees are fair and legitimate? I mean, these are the fundamental puzzles of our time.
Okay, we've gone through the absolute core concepts. If you want to dive deeper, get the full summary, and really test yourself with some practice exams, head over to gradeguru.nl.
All right, let's bring it all home. If you remember nothing else, make sure you lock these key takeaways in for your exam.
Number 1, nail your definition with those 3 core ideas: interconnection, compression, and reorganization of power. 2, know the 5 waves of history and how each one added another layer to the puzzle. 3, be able to explain the 5 facets: economic, political, cultural, ecological, and technological, and have a solid example for each one ready to go. 4, you've got to bring in that critical perspective. Talk about the uneven gains and costs. And finally, number 5, understand that central challenge of governance, that constant battle between national interests and global needs. If you can nail these 5 points, you are going to be in fantastic shape for that exam. Now go crush it.